Agenda Peace has reached new heights with chapter 1189 because Luffy is now sword level, even tree level. The LARPers are getting exposed left and right with AI generated images. And on top of all of that, the theory crafting community caught a massive W. In this video, we're gonna go over all the intricate details of chapter 1189 page by page. But before we get into it, make sure you like this video, hit that notification bell, and subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to check out my full uncut live stream and reaction to this chapter, I have that up on Patreon right now. Without further ado, let's dive into chapter 1189. Starting off with a reader request cover story that has Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji as the see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil monkeys, and of course we have Nami scolding them. Outside of the obvious touches of Luffy doing the Gear 5 pose, I really don't have too much to add to this cover photo. But if you guys caught anything, please let me know in the comments. Chapter 1188 left us off with Imu landing a decisive blow on Luffy. And this chapter jumps us right back into it with Imu then thrusting Luffy into a tree. And with that, a new agenda is born. Now, as we all know, power scaling in One Piece is absolutely useless anyway, but of course people are going to try to do it and then find reasons to fight about it. And when the people who don't even read One Piece see Luffy getting ran through a tree with a sword, they start saying things like Tanjiro can solo the One Piece verse. And while it's all fun and games, the atmosphere on the internet around these last couple chapters has honestly been really frustrating. And for these reasons, I almost never talk about power scaling, especially not across verses. But yeah, big surprise, the strongest enemy in the verse is doing work on Luffy, as if this doesn't happen every other arc. But I will say, this time feels much worse. In our moment of despair, we got a moment that I truly did not see coming. Did Usopp just reawaken his observation hockey in the moment that Luffy caught this massive L? Is this going to be the turning point that Usopp needed to finally lock in on the latent abilities that we know he has had for 450 chapters? Because on this next page, Usopp notices immediately that something happened to Luffy. And funny enough, Nami mentions, "What are you talking about? When has Luffy ever not been okay?" Which on the surface I took as a ridiculously stupid comment because like I said just a moment ago, Luffy gets owned virtually every arc. Kaido killed him twice during Wano. We've seen a similar situation to the last chapter with Crocodile back on Alabasta. Luffy is almost never okay during these fights. But the really interesting bit about this text bubble from Nami is to show us the perspective that the Straw Hats have for their captain. The level of confidence that Nami has in Luffy is astronomical. Our Straw Hats have not seen Luffy fail the way we have. As readers, we forget that we have the bird's eye perspective of a story where our characters within it do not. So for all intents and purposes, most of our Straw Hats have not seen Luffy die the multiple times that he has died during these fights. So an offhanded comment that may feel stupid to the reader is actually a really valuable moment to show you how much faith Luffy's crew has in him. Jinbei then asks Nami to consider what it means that that enormous giant was defeated. And Loki chimes in being like, "Hey, who was defeated? I'm still right here." Brother, you were defeated, I'm sorry to say it. But Jinbei confirms that Luffy's haki is now significantly weaker than it was. Then finally, we have Princess Shuri officially freed from this block of ice. This might be a hot take, but this whole situation with her stuck in the ice and it slowly melting over these last 4 to 5 to 10 chapters has felt like Toei pacing in the manga. Every single chapter we get one page, maybe like 3 to 4 panels of her getting a little bit closer to being freed from this ice, and now we're finally there. And unfortunately, we still don't really move the ball that far forward. Ragnar is not pleased with the fact that they are freeing a Holy Knight from the ice that he encapsulated her in, simply because she's obviously incredibly dangerous. But in classic Toei, I mean Oda fashion, we're just gonna have to wait a couple more panels to see what's gonna happen here. Because we get a hard cut to Hadradin and his crew flying in from the sky, yet again being completely and utterly unable to sail a pirate ship. Of course, they crash land right on top of Loki. We get some cute moments with Chopper and Gerd, and then Gerd gets right to healing Loki, which unfortunately adds more to the fact that there are virtually no stakes within this battle right now in Elbaf. As scary as it is right now, everyone is just going to manage to get healed up from this. This is the second time Gerd has healed Loki from a mortal wound in something like 30 minutes. Of course, Oda doesn't really show how much time is going by, but that being said, Loki has been mortally wounded multiple times in one arc. And based on this, I think he's going to be just fine. As Hadradin shakes off the pain from yet another crash landing, he thinks back to what Yarul told him a few moments ago. Hadradin obviously wanted to stay and protect the kids, but Yarul said it would be better if he could go help Loki. Yarul himself knows that Loki is pretty much the only person who can really help them with the threat that they're dealing with right now. And as we saw, he's still not going to be enough. And Yarul does make note of the fact that he thinks this enemy might be him. And of course, Loki agrees. This small scene with Ja Rule also feels like it's waving even more death flags for this character. While he's been number one on the list of characters who very possibly could die during this arc, I think this moment helps solidify that fact. First off, Ja Rule has some kind of information or memory about Imu and this situation. Obviously, with the wound to his head, it might not all be there, but he is someone who knows a little bit more in this verse than our average character. Also, he is one of, if not the oldest character in the verse outside of Imu and the Gorosei, since he is actively telling Hajirden, the prince, one of the heirs to the throne for this kingdom, that he needs to not stay with him and go somewhere else to help Loki. I think this leads even more to the fact that Ja Rule might die in this fight. But hear me out, Ja Rule is currently in the village where Sanji is fighting Killingham. And in this moment, we need Sanji to truly unlock his Conqueror's Haki so he has even a chance at defeating Killingham. And what better way to unlock your Conqueror's Haki than watching a comrade fall and realizing that you were not enough to protect them? Sanji is still dealing with the loss that he feels from losing the main body of Vegapunk during Egghead. To double that down with him having to watch Ja Rule die again just a few weeks after that happened on Egghead, I think this is a great chance to activate this Haki bloom that he desperately needs. And this could even lead to a more dynamic plot point with Hajirden dealing with the guilt of leaving Ja Rule in a position that he knew he would not succeed in. I think this sets up a lot of good narrative points, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. Back to the literal nightmare of a situation that Luffy is living in right now, we have Imu pulling out yet another blade from his demonic halo, mentioning that currently he cannot move. The sword he has used on him devours vitality. And Imu goes on to ask, how many of these weapons will it take to officially end Monkey D. Luffy? For the first time using his true and full name. And while mentioning his hateful name, he also brings up Luffy's two brothers. One brother slaughtered by the Navy and the other one a prominent member within the Revolutionary Army. This is something I find very interesting. I think it's very obvious that he knows who Ace is and who Ace is to Luffy after the events of Marineford. But the piece with Sabo feels a little bit more confusing to me. Obviously, Imu has met up with Sabo, but at what point was Imu ever able to learn or understand the relationship that Sabo has with Luffy? Publicly, Luffy went to save Ace, and during that situation, we figure out that Ace was Roger's son and the bigger picture behind all of this. But at what point did Sabo ever publicly say that he was the brother of Luffy? Maybe this is just something I'm missing, so if you guys can help me out in the comments, I would love that. That being said, we get yet another named weapon from Imu, this one being the Blade of the Sea God, Froggerach. And I hope that I'm saying that right. In Irish mythology, this weapon belonged to the god of the sea. His name was Menenen MacLear. Again, I'm so sorry about the pronunciation, but his name translates to son of the sea, which of course makes me think of Jinbei, the first son of the sea. But this weapon is said to be unblockable and is also said to actively weaken its foes, which seems to be what Imu said the last sword did, so I'm not totally sure about that text bubble in the last panel. But either way, with the weapon stabbed into Luffy, at this point he is absolutely being drained of all of his energy and also life because he's probably bleeding out. I think it would be very interesting if this weapon had some kind of connection to Davy Jones, since Davy Jones is obviously cursed to walk the ocean floor, so he is some type of a representation of a sea god within this story. Or maybe this comes from a prominent fisherman family, or a weapon stolen from fishermen when the 19 kingdoms pledged their allegiance to Imu. This is also where the AI LARPing allegations come in, because there is a massively viral image going around that is outright showing us that these people don't actually read the story, they just want to hate on it. And this is why I don't like reading leaks, scans, or anything before the official chapter comes out, because in this day and age, you genuinely do not know if these are actual panels or just some AI generated slop, which it is 90% of the time. We then make a jump back to moments after Loki took out Harold in the throne room. Shanks is having a conversation with Loki about what should happen next. And of course, we know Loki is gung-ho for revenge. He is going to destroy anything and everything that has to do with the world government, even if he has no idea about the situation at hand. But Shanks is intimately aware that now is not the time to mount a counterstrike on the world government. He mentions the fact that there is an actual king of the world, and that was the person who was controlling Harold. And then he says something that has all the power scalers shaking in their boots. Imu's power is impossible to measure. Shanks goes on to say it is not yet the time to fight, which is really interesting because in this moment they show a flashback of Rox as well. Rox had a plan. He knew he had to collect certain devil fruits, certain allies, and position himself in a certain way to actually be able to defeat the devil at the top of the world. Rox was intimately aware that the time wasn't right yet. but his hand was forced. And this also parallels to Roger's situation, where he and his crew made it all the way to the end of the Grand Line. They found the One Piece, and they also found out that the time was not right yet. They were too early. I believe it's very possible that this is also what Roger told Shanks when giving him the hat. Not only could he have let him know that you're not the one that we're waiting on, giving Shanks the information he needed to know when the time was in fact right. This leads us to his interactions with Loki, and also leads to the reasoning why Loki thinks Shanks is a coward. Shanks refused to go fight the world government after the situation because he knew that it was a lost cause. But Loki, in all of his pride, was not going to hear that. He was going to get revenge for his father one way or another. And Loki goes on to say he spent many years abroad, but he still never made it to that end goal. Now, of course, we still don't know exactly what led to Shanks locking Loki to that tree, but I do feel like we're going to get that information within the next couple chapters. This is also a really good relationship growth moment between Hajradin and Loki, with Hajradin finally getting the chance to potentially try to avenge his father as well. This is a weight that Loki has had on his shoulders from the day Harold died, and for once Hajradin can finally help him carry that, and they can finally start to be the brothers that King Harold always wanted them to be. King Harold wanted the two of them to rule this country together, more death flags for Yarul, and more potentials that Loki and Hajradin end up being the kings of Elbaf when this is all said and done. Yet another reason why Loki is not going to be the next Straw Hat. We jump back to the argument between Ragnar and Brook, and again, like I'm saying, this whole situation is moving at a snail's pace. Brook mentions that Princess Shuri is like a daughter to him, and he is going to try everything he can to save her. And it does seem like Ragnar starts to kind of get the point, while he's still incredibly weary about this whole situation. And in the middle of this argument, we have our Queen Robin appear, seemingly having heard all the things they've been talking about, saying this is quite an interesting conversation. But she looks at Chopper and says, hey, we need you back at the Owl Library. And just like in this previous panel where we see Chopper translating for Ragnar, I think they need Chopper at the Owl Library to translate for Biblo. I've said this multiple times in past videos that between Ragnar and Biblo, those two characters know almost everything about this world, I'm willing to bet. It seems like Ragnar goes back as far as at least the Void Century, and we simply do not have a date on Biblo, but he is the head of a library that holds seemingly all of the information that is written down in this world. So it's fair to assume that Biblo has a lot that he could tell us about this entire situation. And I'm really hoping this leads to at least a few answers about what the hell is going on. Then we're back into Luffy's nightmare with Emu pulling a third weapon from the demonic halo, this time the Axe of Xingtian. Xingtian is an ancient Chinese war god who one day was decapitated but still refused to stop fighting. He's a symbol of never giving up in Chinese mythos. And if you look up any photos of him, like this one right here, it's pretty much all nightmare fuel since his nipples became his eyes, his stomach became his mouth, and well, you get the gist. Next, we jump to the Sea Cloud port where Zoro is fighting Sommers. And we see Zoro letting out his strongest known attack, the 103 Mercy's Dragon Damnation, and it does absolutely nothing to Sommers. He blocks it with ease using the blade Graham. Now before I go any further, I would like to send a small apology to the Holy Knights because I was unaware with your game when geeked off a bean from Emu. Because what do you mean Zoro just threw his strongest attack, the attack he used to defeat King, and it was no diff blocked in a simple stance by Sommers? It's bad, it's really bad. And as many of you I'm sure noticed in this moment, we have already seen the weapon Graham be used by Emu in previous chapters. It turns out Emu is in fact using the weapons of the 19 kings that were placed before the empty throne. So I'm gonna need some dubs in the chat for the entire theory crafting community who was cooking on that last week, because we did it, guys. We were absolutely right about that one. But the crazy twist is the fact that all of the Holy Knights can use these weapons as well, which is truly horrifying. Sommers goes on to list out these weapons with Tohu and Vohu, Nemesis and Stigma, Longinus and Muramasa. And with a list like this, I feel like it's time for us to do a deep dive on Emu's weapons and where all the mythology around them comes from. So if you guys would like to see that, let me know in the comments. I'll start working on that now. But Sommers goes on to explain how these weapons were passed down through all these royal families. The Shepherd family provided Graham, the Blade of Wrath. And the Rimushifu family, Killingham's family, provided the spear Longinus, which is the name given to the unknown Roman soldier who stabbed Jesus' right side with a spear. You also may recognize a weapon like this from Neon Genesis Evangelion. And while we're speaking on Jesus iconography, the move Stigma could also be read as Stigmata. And Stigmata are the wounds given to Jesus during his nailing to the cross. Every time we've seen Emu use Stigma, it seems to send a beam of fire straight through the opponent. And as we learn about these 19 weapons, Imu raises his axe to land the finishing blow on Luffy. And in the nick of time, we see Scopper Gaban burst through the tree and block Imu's attacks. And that ends the chapter. With the way this chapter ends, I feel like the thing on everybody's mind is how the hell is Scopper Gaban going to survive this? And yet again, I think this is a perfect opportunity to bring the stakes up in this final saga of the story. We spoke earlier heavily about the death flags that are surrounding Yarul, and I think with Scopper Gaban, we're seeing almost just as many. We already know that Gaban is entering this fight in a relatively weakened state. Of course, battle wounds don't mean too much in this story, but in theory, Scopper Gaban should not be able to go toe-to-toe with Imu right now. Especially since Imu just no-diffed Luffy and took out Loki, one of the biggest creatures in this story, if not the biggest. I think at best, Scopper Gaban, I think in this moment, the Straw Hats need to act and act fast. Scopper Gaban did provide an opportunity for them to snag Luffy while he's dealing with Imu. Now personally, I don't think he's going to be able to keep Imu occupied for any realistic amount of time. But if somebody can at least get to Luffy at this moment, then Scopper's sacrifice won't be in vain. Scopper knows that Luffy has to survive this situation, but Scopper Gaban doesn't. Yes, we are all looking to Scopper Gaban to potentially train our Straw Hats in this time skip that everyone thinks is coming. But that being said, outside of the 2-year time skip we got with Rayleigh, there's not been a single moment where the Straw Hats have just stopped what they're doing and trained. Haki blooms in the middle of combat. It does not bloom while simply training. So I think if anything, the training arc is now. The training arc is happening as we speak. Zoro and Sanji are training. And sadly, Luffy trains by getting killed once or twice by the enemy. So I'm actually one of the ones who's hoping that Oda did take a lot of notes at that dinner he had with Gege Akutami. Even though this is all a bunch of agenda, I really do hope Oda stops pulling his punches with the biggest threat we've seen in this story. Overall, this was a really good chapter. We still have a lot of setup going on that we've been kind of going through for the last 3, but we did progress. I have to say I am thoroughly impressed with the fact that Imu did try to double tap Luffy. I was completely wrong about that theory in my last breakdown because I'm a bit cynical. Generally speaking, in battle shonen and stories like this, when our main character runs into the big bad when it's a bit too early in the story for them to do that, they do take an overwhelming loss, but the big bad never tends to double tap the MC. Whether it be hubris or pride that stops them from doing it because they don't think it's necessary, or some kind of plot device stops them from doing it, we rarely see the big bad actually go for the kill. But in this situation, Imu did just that. Luffy got ran through by 2 swords pinned up on a tree, and then Imu goes to swing this axe at his throat. So I have to applaud Imu for going for it. And I got to applaud our boy Scopper Gaban for being the only one who could even possibly block an attack like this right now. So that being said, I think it's time to place our bets. Are we going to lose Yarul or Scopper Gaban? Will they both go out, or are they both going to survive this fight? What do you guys think is going to happen next? Regardless of deaths and high stakes, I am genuinely worried for Zoro and Sanji. In the last chapter breakdown, I was a little bit cocky thinking that Zoro was going to do just fine and he was going to dog walk Sommers. But after seeing him throw his strongest attack at Sommers and it get easily blocked, I am genuinely terrified for all of our Straw Hats at this point. There is truly nobody left on Elbaf who can make a serious difference in this situation other than Princess Shuri or an outside force. Of course, we have a lot of theories about Dragon potentially showing up. Everybody loves to quote the fact that Dragon said he will make his moves when the Holy Knights make their moves. So now they have obviously made their move on Elbaf, it could be possible that Dragon shows up to save the day. But personally, I think that's a little bit of a reach. The next person people are jumping to is Shanks possibly pulling up because this is his territory, and we know that he was near to Elbaf before Luffy and gang got there because he took out Kid shortly before their arrival. But also with that, I feel like it's too early. I feel like Shanks and Dragon are true endgame characters, and we're not going to really have them intervene this early on. Secondly, if Shanks were to intervene, I think it would completely undermine the entire story between Shanks and Luffy. When Shanks originally gave Luffy his hat, he told him to bring it back to him once he had become a great pirate. If Shanks has to come save his ass from this battle, even though it is a battle with the god of the world, that would go against Luffy proving himself to Shanks. Of all people in the world, I think Shanks is the last one to help Luffy do anything in this story. Not because he doesn't want to save him or he doesn't care about Luffy, but because it goes against the promise they made to each other. And in a story like this, these promises are really important to these characters. Going back to the Dragon bit, I still think he's too occupied with Marie Joie to be able to come all the way to Elbaf and deal with this situation. So honestly, I think it all boils down to Princess Shuri and whatever the hell is going on with her. But I'm gonna need Oda to stop with this Toei pacing and actually have Princess Shuri wake up and let us know what the hell is going to happen with her. But I have a lot of faith that this next chapter could focus heavily on that. But of course, we do have 3 other active fights going on in the verse with Zoro and Sommers, Sanji and Killingham, and now Scopper and Emu. But we all know at least one of those fights is gonna go pretty quick. But that is all I have for chapter 1189. Please drop all your favorite theories and your thoughts in the comments below. And if you would like to interact more with the community, we have a Discord in the description. I also have a Twitch where I stream the new One Piece chapter every Sunday, give you guys a reaction, and then I upload that full live stream on Patreon later that day. And of course, that leads me to the Patreon where I have a ton of exclusive anime reaction content, manga reaction content, 3-episode tests, and more. So check out all those links in the description, and as always, tell the people you love them, touch grass, drink some water, and I will see you guys in the next chapter review. Peace.